Hello, everyone. Welcome to the College Football Playbook podcast. I am Marc Givler. I am joined today by BuckeyeHuddle.com's Swiss Army knife, Kevin Noon. We're going to talk some Big Ten football in this episode. Before we get started, we are like a newer channel. So if people can kind of help us out by subscribing, we really appreciate that. You can just hit that subscribe button down below and the thumbs up button. And if you're listening to this on the audio version and you want to help us out on YouTube, you can go to youtube.com/@ CFB playbook to do that for us. So appreciate everyone doing that. But let's jump into it. Off season's here, so it's list season now, right? Isn't that kind of what the off season's for? Is going through the lists. And Kevin and I are going to talk about today is the breakout stars in the Big Ten Conference. These are players that Kevin and I expect to have huge seasons, that either were young guys this past fall and didn't quite get to get as much playing time as they will this fall, or on some of these guys, maybe incoming transfers from outside the league. So these are our breakouts, Big Ten stars for the 2023 college football season. We have one guy who overlaps on both of our lists. So we are going to talk about him first and kind of get that one out of the way since we have him on both of our lists. That is Penn State second-year quarterback Drew Aller. I covered Drew as a recruit. I've always been a huge fan of his game. I think Kevin did as well. Kevin, your thoughts on Drew Aller and maybe one of the easier picks for us to make?
Yeah, when we talked about doing this show in like pre-production, Drew Aller came. I mean, we weren't even done with the conversation. I'm like, well, I know I got one, and then everything else I had to work a little bit more on. But you look at Penn State and you look at last year, and there certainly were a lot of people who thought that should be the year of Drew Aller, not the final 17th year of Sean Clifford. Allar's numbers were very limited: 35 of 60 last year for 344 yards, 4 touchdowns. And now it's sink or swim, because Sean Clifford is now a grandfather or whatever he is. He's gone. And I can't name another quarterback on the Penn State roster, if we're being completely honest, and I pay particular attention to the Big Ten. It's Allar's game at this point. And I think that everything I saw coming out of Ohio high school football and in very limited action at Penn State, I think that it's going to be a situation of where Aller is going to flourish. You have a great running game around him with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. They go and pick up a big transfer from Kent State with Cephas. I mean, I think that he's going to have the weapons there. I mean, the big question always with Penn State year in and year out is what's the offensive line going to be? But there's no shortage of talent when it comes to Aller. He's a guy who could make a lot of the throws, if not most of the throws. You do have to kind of wonder about some inconsistency in terms of James Franklin and getting his team to be elite, and maybe some of their late decisions in games. But I think Aller was far and away the easiest choice when it was open to just Big Ten players and who is going to be that breakout guy.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty easy decision on my end as well. I know a lot of Penn State fans were kind of clamoring for him this season. I actually think this year played out perfectly for Drew. For people who maybe didn't follow him in high school, he was kind of late onto the recruiting scene. This is not a kid who's been like groomed to play quarterback since he was 5 years old. He really only started focusing on being a quarterback, playing football like sophomore years, when he really started to like lock in and say, okay, I'm going to be a quarterback. And so he's not as far ahead maybe developmentally as maybe some of these other young 5-star quarterbacks coming out of high school are. So I thought this was a perfect freshman first season for him to get his feet wet a little bit, but to not have the weight of the world put on him and to let a veteran like Sean Clifford kind of steer the ship. So now he's going to have this full off season. I don't think there's really a competition at Happy Valley. That's going to be the guy they're going to go with. So he's going to have this full off season to just, get ready and, get that whole confidence boost of being, hey, it's your team now type of thing. So I think everything went well this year for him developmental wise for the long term. And, I'm not going to repeat everything you said, but with the weapons, but look at the weapons. I mean, he's got outstanding weapons. Obviously, Michigan and Ohio State have great weapons too, but I would put Penn State's weapons up there pretty high within the Big Ten for sure. As far as offensive skill, I mean, I maybe number two behind Ohio State, even give it with the combination of weapons they have. So I think he's going to be well insulated with that, and yeah, I would expect him to have a pretty big season. So that was the guy we had. We both had. Now it gets fun. I'll let Kevin. I'll let you talk about whoever you want to talk about next.
Yeah, I have four more guys on my list. I'm trying to figure out the best order to go in, and you're going to see a common theme for me, and it's a quarterback driven game. And I have a lot of quarterbacks on here, and I kind of changed my criteria from guy to guy of what it was going to be. But I'm going to go with former Texas quarterback Hudson Card, who's now going to Purdue, and got beat out by Quinn Ewers. Was a four-star quarterback in his own right. We had the opportunity to go talk to him as a recruit when we were out doing some recruiting work here in the industry. He was 75 completions out of 108 attempts, 6 touchdowns and a pick last year. He filled in for Quinn Ewers when Quinn Ewers was injured. He got hurt in the Alabama game and missed a little bit of time there. I obviously had to go find greener pastures. We'll have enough fun watching what happens between Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning at Texas is what happens there. But you got a lot of changes at Purdue. I mean, obviously Jeff Brom is gone. What does this offense look like there? I mean, it was an offense under Brom that was very quarterback friendly. Aiden O'Connell had been there for about 17 years as well. I mean, just seems to be kind of a trend. And it was a very exciting passing offense. I mean, no, they didn't have a David Bell last year. They're not going to have a David Bell this year, but I think Hudson Card is going to be a good fit. And I think that he's somebody just based on what I think that they're going to be able to do with the offense. And again, it's kind of sight unseen. It's a new staff there. It did give me a little bit of pause of being like, you're bringing in a defensive minded head coach. What does that mean? Is he going to be far enough along in his own mindset to say, I got to bring in somebody offensive minded and then leave him the hell alone? Let him do his thing. But I think Hudson Card has the tools to be very successful in a conference that just didn't have a lot of great quarterback play last year outside of its top couple guys.
Yeah, you and I took a little bit different approaches to the list. We didn't have any rules, just that it was a guy who didn't, have like a monster. So it had to be like either a newcomer or a young player who didn't play a lot last year or whatever. So you went transfer route, which was kind of outside the box, which will I think create some interesting discussion here as we continue to move forward on the lists. It is an interesting thought, and I would be more on board. I think if Brom was still there, this would have been an obvious one where it's like, okay, we know what the offense is going to look like. We know, there's a history, there's a proof of performance there from the Purdue offense. But it's an interesting pick. He looked really good actually at Texas when he got to play this year, but was obviously with Quinn Ewers transferring in, they weren't going to not play Quinn Ewers. So that's kind of unfortunate for him, kind of how it fell out. But when he did play, he was actually very good. So that'll be certainly one of the most interesting transfer portal, I think, decisions that will kind of unfold this fall. I will keep it on the offensive side of the ball. And this is where I don't know if I'm cheating here or not. We're going to have to maybe get a ruling on this. And it's another former Ohio kid. So I've covered this kid for a while, but he was phenomenal at the very end of the season. Didn't play a lot early, so I think I'm okay here. Some people may throw a flag on me, challenge flag, and say that this guy has already emerged as a star in the Big Ten. But I am going with second year Iowa running back Caleb Johnson. Caleb had a monster finish to the regular season. He had a 200-yard game against Purdue in November, and also had a 100-yard game against Nebraska. I know. Look, he plays. He gets. I think he had, I don't know, 15 carries in September or in the first 3 or 4 games of the season. Then they started working him in more. So again, if anyone wants to throw the challenge flag on me, um, in the comments, that's fine. I will accept criticism here, but I'm looking at someone who again rushed for 700 plus yards and 6 touchdowns in an offense that was not so good. So
Putrid is the
uh,
word. Putrid.
yeah, he legitimately was a game changer for them though down the stretch. Like this was an offense they could not move the football, and they didn't exactly move it great the last part of the season either. But just he was like seeming like the only answer in the running game for them consistently, and so I think he's poised to have like a big 1,200 plus yard second year. Again, very talented kid. Came out of Southwest Ohio a couple of years ago, so I got to watch him in high school a bit, and um, fits what they want to do offensively. Did they were they able to do what they wanted to do offensively the last couple seasons? No, but I think guys like Caleb Johnson will hopefully for them improve that Iowa offense. And again, I was just so impressed with him down the stretch the last couple of games of the regular season. Am I cheating by using him?
No, because when I get to my next pick, people are going to howl and be like, "That's how can that guy be a breakout guy?" So my biggest issue was there were two names I wanted to pick from Iowa, and I didn't take either of them to be quite honest. Because first of all, when we're talking about offense on this point, offense in Iowa just cannot be in the same sentence unless terrible is somewhere in between it. So, but I kind of looked at Cade McNamara, who obviously 2 years ago did some good things for Michigan, and then last year lost his job and then ended up getting hurt, and then had to transfer. And then I was also was looking at Eric All, and I had at the tight end, and I had a hard time being like, well, he was Michigan's best tight end last year. I mean, how can I put him there? So no, I think somebody who kind of comes on late, and I mean, and the degree of difficulty is already there because of Brian Ferentz's offense. So I think that one's fair. I like that one more than what my next pick's going to be, but I have an agenda behind my next pick.
All right, we'll fire away with it.
I took transfer to Wisconsin quarterback Tanner Mordecai, the former SMU quarterback who threw for 3,500 plus yards last year. How is he going to break out? How are you going to break out? Well, you were playing in the American, and now you're going to be playing in the Big Ten, and things are going to be very serious. And it's very, and you can sit there and say, well, Wisconsin, this ain't Paul Chryst' team anymore. This is Luke Fickell's team, and I think that when you completely reset the deck like that, I mean, and sure, when we're talking about Purdue, Purdue's resetting the deck with a new coach, but we're really resetting the deck at Wisconsin because everything is going to change. Because once again, we're talking about a team that was pretty boring and vanilla on offense. Feed it to Braylon Allen, feed it to whoever the big running back is, and then try not to screw up too much on in the throw game. And you would occasionally get a Jared Aberdarius type out there that would do something. I mean, because you have to go back a little bit to sit there and be like, wow, that's the last receiver that I remember doing a lot. So you bring in Tanner Mordecai, who had over the last two seasons had 72 passing touchdowns and 4 rushing, so 76. How many touchdowns did Wisconsin score in the last 2 years on offense? 79. So
Wow.
Tanner Mordecai had 76 and Wisconsin offense had 79 over the course of the last 2 seasons. So this is going to be a huge change. And will it be something that carries over? Because let's remember, while we're staying in the Big Ten, Shea Patterson leaves Ole Miss and goes to Michigan. And right when that happened, I said, he's going into a much worse situation. I don't care if he was born in Ann Arbor or whatever. He didn't have the type of receivers in Ann Arbor that he had in Oxford, Mississippi. So I'll be very interested to see what this rebuild offense looks like, what Wisconsin's going to be able to do in a highly winnable Big Ten West. So there's just so many subplots to this that I want to see that I just felt it was too important to talk about it to be trapped and just boxed in by rules of what exactly a breakout player is.
Yeah, I mean, by the rules we laid out, it technically, I guess, qualifies since he has not thrown a touchdown pass in the Big Ten to this point. So that will be an interesting one. I certainly am expecting Wisconsin to open things up and kind of join this century offensively. So that's going to be interesting. So on that end, you would really like Mordecai to have a great season. On the other end of it is Wisconsin offensively going to be ready for that type of offense this fall? Did have they hit the portal enough? Have they have they developed enough to get to that level in year one? We'll see. That'll be the kind of the $1 million question, I think, for how their season goes. But yeah, that's certainly an interesting one. There's a lot of interesting transfers where that's like a whole separate podcast episode is like just the quarterback transfers around the country and the musical chairs and who the winners and losers of all of that. And I'm sure we'll get into that here this off season, but yeah, that's definitely an interesting one. You mentioned at some point during all that, you mentioned Eric All. I'm going to throw a guy out here who is, essentially replacing Eric All, and that is Colston Loveland, Michigan's second year, soon to be second year tight end. Michigan had some injury issues at tight end this year. Eric All got hurt. Schoonmaker comes in, plays very well, but then gets hurt at some point and, missed some time during the kind of, I think, the back half of the season, missed a little time. Off to the NFL, I believe, right? I believe he just declared. So Colston Loveland steps in late in the season and has like 3 great games. I watched him against Ohio State. I watched him against TCU. I watched him against Illinois, and there was like a 4th game. I watched a bunch of them down the stretch, and this guy's always made plays, and he just looks the part. Jim Harbaugh loves to throw to the tight end. I think he's going to get a lot of targets. I think he's an NFL. I think he's almost a sure NFL guy in 2 more years once he's eligible for the draft. I think he's going to maybe be a very highly drafted player. So I think this is going to be the big breakout tight end in the Big Ten this fall. And I think the sky's just about the limit there. I think he's one of the most talented young tight ends in the country. So that was my pick. Kevin, I know you watched. Obviously, you watched quite a bit of Michigan as well this year. Am I on the right track here with Colston Loveland?
I think you're on the right track. My big question always is, when it comes to the Michigan passing game, it's a different guy each week. And is it going to be a case of, are you going to be able to stack enough weeks of where you're the guy? Because you go through, and obviously they had, several different tight ends last year. And for, as you'd mentioned, the injury, or I mentioned the injury to All, and you mentioned the injury to Schoonmaker and everything else. But even when they got Ronnie Bell back, he wasn't necessarily the guy that we thought he was going to be. And we can go back a couple years prior, and when you have a class with, when you have DPJ and you have Tariq Black and you have some of these other guys, and they don't necessarily have consistency, but I think that they found the right quarterback now to be able to deliver the ball. And I think that JJ McCarthy there is going to be Colston Loveland's best friend. And I think that's going to be the difference now in terms of why Loveland will be able to succeed, whereas some of these other names maybe came up short because of inconsistency of the guy trying to deliver the ball to them.
Yeah, McCarthy and Loveland seem to have quite a bit of chemistry as well. That was kind of another thing that kind of felt like that really seemed to be a good connection there down the stretch for Michigan. So, yeah, I think he's going to be one of the breakout tight end stars around the country actually. So it'll be interesting. All right, we've each gotten through our 3 of our 5, right?
Right.
Okay, who's number 4?
Well, I once again changed my parameters here and took a player who is an incoming freshman. And I don't know what he is yet. I really don't. And that is Malachi Coleman. And I'm just going to call him an athlete who is going to Nebraska. 6'4" guy, 4-star, out of Lincoln. Kid's a freak. I mean, kid is absolutely a freak. And I know Marc's going to be able to say more, having the opportunity to see him in San Antonio and everything else. I mean, he was a star playing on offense and defense. I mean, you have to hit on a kid like this. A kid like this has to produce if this Matt Rule era is going to be different than the previous 6 eras at Nebraska. This is the type of kid that's going to have to hit. And I think that with Matt Rule, he is going to be able to be Matt Rule, the head coach, and be able to make decisions that maybe Scott Frost favorite son, former player, everything else was kind of shoehorned into some things. So I think that Coleman is somebody I'm just so intrigued, but I'm going to say this for my own sanity. Every year I buy into Nebraska. This year's going to be different. They're not going to be terrible. They're going to do this. 8 wins is the floor. And then I look stupid. So I'm going to be very careful and sit there and not have all these great platitudes about what Nebraska is going to be in 2023, but I am completely 100% buying what Malachi Coleman is going to be, whatever that may be.
Kevin New, Nebraska homer. I don't know. No, not from Nebraska. Never covered Nebraska. Just have a thing for Nebraska. Apparently, I don't know.
I'm okay with Runzas. I guess that's okay.
Uh, I saw Malachi down in San Antonio at the All American Bowl. I was down there all week for practice in the game, just earlier this month, and he was without question one of the most 4 or 5 most impressive offensive players I think I saw all week. He was absolutely tremendous in practice. He he's got this huge frame. He's got these long arms. Just goes over top of defenders, makes these acrobatic catches. I think he's a receiver. He's a potentially dynamic receiver, actually, and I agree. The Nebraska roster has been really kind of devoid of meaningful difference making talent the last couple of years. I think he's an instant impact guy. I hate saying that about true freshmen just because it's so hard to make that transition, but he's not walking into, Penn State or Michigan or Ohio State, in terms of the competition. He's going to have to climb to get onto the field. I think he's out there early, and yeah, I can buy that. I think he's definitely, if this was a, 5 most impactful true freshmen in the Big Ten or something like that, I would absolutely have him on my list. So I can see it. Um, I am going to get into. I got 3 offensive guys. I already went through those. I got my last 2 guys are defensive guys, and I'm going to start with someone who I first saw in 8th grade and knew instantly at that point was going to be an absolute monster recruit. And I don't know that I've ever said that about any other 8th grader I've ever seen, maybe 1 or 2 others. It's a very short list. I'm usually like, okay, wake me up when they're sophomores or something. But and that is Ohio State, second year safety, athlete, weapon, hybrid, linebacker, whatever we're calling him, Sonny Styles. Former 5-star recruit out of Pickerington Central, reclassified from 23 to 22. So was essentially a 17-year-old freshman for most of the year. Turned 18 during the season. Was out there in the Peach Bowl against Georgia. Was part of their I guess their 12 personnel defensive package, essentially of how do we stop Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers? Well, we put a freak athlete like Sonny Styles, who hasn't played a ton all year, out there, and so he got some run in the Peach Bowl. He got run throughout the year, but again, was not a key part of the defense. But I think he's going to be this year. He's playing some safety right now. I think he's going to be one of those guys. I think we saw a glimpse of it in the Peach Bowl with kind of how they were using him. I don't think they're going to pigeonhole him into one position. I think the Ohio State defensive staff is going to move him around. I think if he's one of those guys where, if you're playing a dominant tight end offense like Georgia, you make him the tight end stopper that week. If you're playing maybe a team that's got a really good dual threat quarterback, maybe he's your quarterback spy the next week. If you're playing a team that's maybe got more of a statue at quarterback, but can kind of pick you apart, maybe you're blitzing and maybe he's playing on the edge that week. So he's one of the most supremely talented high school football players I've ever covered. And so with the buzz you're hearing around Columbus about him, and then you see him out there in the Peach Bowl, and he was out there on special teams a lot this year for Ohio State, and was made some late game type impact plays in some garbage time minutes that he got throughout the season as well. There's just nothing not to like about him. So
Yeah, absolutely. The only reason he didn't make my list is because I got another Ohio State player who's my 5th one, and I just didn't want to have 2 from any team. I was very careful with that. I mean, there are 14 teams in the Big Ten, and while you may sit there and debate, okay, well, Ohio State or Michigan are the most talented teams in in the conference, so therefore it wouldn't be weird for them to have two. I really tried to limit things in. I think that Sonny, he's a neighbor of mine. Well, was a neighbor of mine. Now he lives on campus, but I mean, I live in Pickerington. I've had, certainly had the opportunity to see, his play at length, and I mean, we talk about ceiling and what the ceiling is for a guy. I mean, this kid has no idea how good he is. And I mean, and the fact that he should be a true freshman this year and already has a year of collegiate experience. And I mean, not only did he play against Georgia, but he played early. I mean, because he was in that 12, the defense of the 12 package, and then Darnell Washington got hurt, and then he wasn't necessarily needed as much, even though Georgia is four tight ends deep. I mean, got a lot of guys there. Obviously, we focused on two of them because those were the big names of production this year. But Sonny is an incredible player, and yeah, I agree 5,000% that he belongs on this list.
Well, you said you had an Ohio State guy as your fifth guy. What are you? And you're kind of bending the rules again here, right?
Of course I am.
So
It's
let's
my
hear it.
playground. I'm going to do what I want. And I got TBD Ohio State quarterback. And I will limit that to it being either Kyle McCord or Devin Brown. Ohio State has an incoming freshman with Lincoln Keenholz. I don't think that he would be able to fit that spot. They're bringing in a transfer quarterback from Oregon State, previously from Nebraska, with Tristan Gebbia. I'm sorry, he's not going to fit that spot, but it's going to be one of these two guys that are going to come in. And just based on what Ohio State has been able to do at the quarterback position here recently with Ryan Day, either as Ohio State's head coach or offensive coordinator, I have no reason to doubt that whoever gets the starting nod is going to be a breakout player and is going to put up huge numbers. Now, does that mean that they're going to come out and put up Justin Fields or CJ Stroud year one numbers? I mean, I don't know, but I'm going to tell you right now that when we're talking about the quarterback awards for the conference, you're going to sit there and it's going to be a short list of the guys that I think that are truly going to be there. And I'm going to already go against something I said earlier. I'm not even going to put Tanner Mordecai on that list. It's going to be McCarthy, Allar, or Ohio State's quarterback, and I guess maybe Talia Tungavaloa as well. I mean, we're suddenly going from a conference that was pretty meh at quarterback to a conference that's going to have some pretty good quarterback play. But I think that whether it is the elder statesman and Kyle McCord or the younger guy and Devin Brown, both of them have the pedigree and have shown flashes where they've been able to. And unfortunately, with Devin Brown, you have to really kind of go back to high school stuff because he's had even less run than McCord, who did have the opportunity to start a game last season against Akron, I believe, when they held CJ Stroud out for a shoulder injury. But this is one of these of where you just know that an Ohio State quarterback in this day and age is going to put up ridiculous numbers within the way that the Ohio State offense is set up, regardless of Ryan Day is calling it or Brian Hartline's calling it or we're calling it. It's too big to fail.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that whoever wins that battle is not going to be successful. Given the receivers they're going to have, my goodness, that the receiver talent there. Cade Stover comes back at tight end. You're going to get your running backs back healthy. You got a couple things on the offensive line you got to figure out between now and August, but it makes sense. I mean, if you would have played this game 2 years ago, you would have had CJ Stroud on the list and he would have been a Heisman finalist. You would have looked really good. So, makes total sense to me. Don't see, maybe the Ohio State offense, maybe the passing game goes down a little. CJ Stroud was a phenomenal thrower of the football, but it's hard to see the Ohio State offense not being explosive again next year. This will bring me to my last guy. I did go with two guys on one team. I was kind of trying to avoid it, but this one just kind of made sense to me. I've got Iowa safety, Xavier Wampa, obviously former big-time national recruit, played here and there throughout the season for Iowa as a true freshman this past fall, and then had a tremendous bowl game against Kentucky, had an interception. Um, Iowa's been right up there with like Georgia, really, the last couple of years on defense. I mean, they've been a phenomenal defensive team the last couple of years, and um, I think he's their next defensive star. They've done a really good job producing defensive backs and safeties, especially, and I think Wampa, you know, his high school pedigree was obviously impressive. Then you see him; he's out there on the field this fall, as a little bit as a true freshman. But again, you watch the bowl game; I think it was like 8 tackles and an interception. He had a tremendous bowl game against Kentucky, and it felt like almost, it wasn't quite as like impressive, but it felt a little bit like the Marvin Harrison Rose Bowl like 2 years ago, and it was like, oh yeah, this guy's gonna be amazing next year, and that's kind of how it felt a little bit watching Xavier Wampa. I was like, oh yeah, I think he's gonna be ready to go next year for Iowa. So that's my fifth guy.
And there's never a reason to apologize for taking an Iowa defensive player. I mean, that's just in this where they are right now with their defense. There's no apologies. I mean, just plug and play at that point. And I agree that Nwankpa is just an amazing player, and he's going to be that next guy. And you sit there and you see, whether it's like a Riley Moss or Merriweather or whoever for Iowa. I mean, these guys just get in there and they make plays and they excel. And yeah, so that one that just makes a ton of sense to me as well. And at least you had two defensive players. I didn't have any. So obviously I'm that guy that just likes to follow the football around and loves offense and hates defense. But Wonka was somebody that I thought about too for a hot second. But as I said, I kicked around the ideas of McNamara and all and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And lo and behold, I just froze myself out of taking any of them. But if you would have taken multiple Iowa offensive players, I might have called a foul at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, that might have been a little overkill. That might have been too much. I do want to like caveat something here because I can already, I hope we'll get some stuff in the comments about guys that, your guys list, share your five, list in the comments, or even your one or two guys or offense and defense, whatever. Just, share your thoughts in the comments on maybe who you guys think. But I think there's going to be one guy that a lot of people are going to look at this and say, wait, you didn't say him. And we kind of had a pre-recording powwow and decided he was not eligible for this because he's already a star. We determined he's already a kind of a star. That is Will Johnson, cornerback from Michigan. Basically was their top corner last year, had 3 interceptions, almost 30 tackles. So we determined, and maybe that's a little hypocritical after I snuck Caleb Johnson on there, but we determined that Will Johnson kind of has already arrived. So
Yeah, I mean, we both kind of came to that same conclusion there. I mean, and there are a lot of guys out there. I mean, I could hear some people coming in and saying, "What about Dallin Hayden for Ohio State?" or some guys like that. And I don't feel that Dallin played enough to necessarily disqualify himself. But I think with Ohio State returning Trevion Henderson and Mayan Williams, that I don't know how many carries are going to be there. But when it comes to Will Johnson at Michigan, he certainly played enough. I mean, when we talk about like baseball and a player being fully qualified for stats and everything else, well, Will Johnson's fully qualified. He played more than enough. And yes, Tanner Mordecai played more than enough, but it was at a different school at outside of the group of 5. Sorry, American. It's not Power 6. I don't care.
Don't tell that to UCF fans, but yeah. So that will be our one kind of caveat here. Other than that, though, we would love to kind of hear from everyone in the comments and see what you guys think about the next wave of stars in the Big Ten. But again, you can download this podcast in audio form on any of your podcast platforms of choice. You can also find us on YouTube. It's youtube.com/@CFB playbook. Please like and subscribe. Help us grow this newer channel so we can get things rolling even more. We got a lot of content ideas for this channel moving forward. But thanks everyone for watching. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.